When children stop showing respect to their parents, the first instinct is often to blame the child. But if you're honest and you look carefully, you'll see that disrespect is often a symptom, not the root problem. At the core of the issue lies a breakdown in authority, and authority, real authority, is not something you're granted automatically. It's something you earn by accepting the heavy burden of responsibility. If your child sees that you aren't in control of yourself, your habits, your moods, or your household, why would they believe you're fit to lead them? A parent who abdicates responsibility creates chaos in the home. That chaos doesn't appear all at once. It sneaks in slowly, first as disorganization, then as passivity, and eventually as resentment, both from the child and the parent. Children are incredibly perceptive. They may not articulate it in words, but they sense when their parent has stepped down from their role. They feel the vacuum of leadership, and they react to it. That reaction is often defiance, testing, or outright rebellion. Not because they want to destroy the structure, but because they're searching for it. When you don't take the lead, your children are forced to guess the rules, and guessing leads to anxiety. When they don't know what will trigger punishment, when standards shift from day to day based on your mood or fatigue, they lose trust, not just in you, but in the world. A parent's role is to embody stability. That means doing what you say you'll do, enforcing rules even when it's inconvenient, and modeling the very behavior you expect from them. Consistency isn't optional, it's essential. Taking responsibility also means confronting uncomfortable truths about your own behavior. Are you escaping into your phone, your work, or your frustrations instead of dealing with the disorder in your home? Are you using busyness or tiredness as an excuse to avoid conflict or hard conversations? Responsibility is not about perfection. It's about courage. It's the willingness to face discomfort now to prevent deeper pain later. And children, more than anyone, need to see that courage in action. This isn't about becoming a dictator. It's not about control for the sake of ego. It's about structure. It's about creating a foundation where children know they're safe, because someone is paying attention. Someone is steering the ship. Children do not want unchecked freedom. They may scream for it, but when they get it, they often become lost. Boundaries give them direction. Boundaries give them meaning. If you want your child's respect, you must first respect yourself enough to reclaim your authority. That doesn't mean shouting louder. It means speaking with weight, because your words are backed by action. It means stepping into your role as a leader, not with force, but with presence, with a spine, with clarity. The moment you do that, you'll find that your children start to respond differently, not overnight, but inevitably. In the end, responsibility is the cornerstone of parenthood, not love without rules, not authority without care, but both together. A parent who accepts the responsibility to lead, to protect, and to guide, even in the face of failure, commands respect, because they have earned it. And when your child sees that, truly sees it, they begin to follow not because they must, but because they believe you're worth following. Many parents fall into the trap of wanting to be their child's friend. It's a seductive role. Friendship feels easier, less confrontational. You avoid the arguments, the resistance, the cold stares. You get to hear you're the best instead of I hate you. But parenting is not a popularity contest. The need to be liked can quietly erode your credibility. If your decisions are guided by your child's approval, you've already surrendered your leadership. Children don't need more friends. They have classmates, neighbors, cousins. What they need, what they crave even when they resist it, is someone who can provide direction, someone they can look to and say, that person knows where we're going. When a parent tries to win approval instead of showing authority, they blur the very lines that give children security. A friend can be dismissed, a leader cannot. Respect is not built on indulgence. If you say yes every time your child demands something, you're teaching them that authority is negotiable, that rules don't matter. That power belongs to the loudest voice in the room, and the moment you teach that, don't be surprised when your child uses that same lesson against you. You thought you were being kind, what you were really doing was eroding the foundation of your role. Being worth following means doing what is right, not what is easy. It means setting boundaries that may upset your child in the moment, but protect them in the long run. It means saying no when it would be easier to give in. It means telling them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. That takes strength. It takes vision, and above all, it takes courage. The courage to be temporarily disliked in order to be permanently respected. When children know that you are firm, not because you're rigid, but because you care, something changes. They begin to internalize that love isn't always soft, that love sometimes shows up as discipline, as structure, as limits, and deep down, that is what allows them to feel safe. When you're always trying to be liked, your child senses the instability. They feel that their emotions are in control, and that scares them more than they'll admit. You may worry that by being firm, you'll drive your child away, but the opposite is true. Children return to strength. They test your limits not because they want you to back down, but because they need to know you won't. That steadiness becomes their compass. They might fight you, argue with you, even hate you for a time, but they'll also come to you when life becomes hard, because they'll know that your love isn't flimsy. It holds. Ultimately, the goal is not to be adored by your children in every moment. The goal is to become someone they can trust, someone they can model their lives after, someone who doesn't flinch in the face of conflict, who doesn't fold at the first sign of pressure. That kind of parent is not always liked, but they are always remembered, and more often than not, they are loved more deeply than they'll ever know. One of the most common reasons children act out or become defiant is because they don't actually know what the expectations are. Or worse, they do know, but they've learned that the rules don't really matter. A parent says one thing, does another, and then wonders why their child is confused, resistant, or disrespectful. Children aren't born knowing how to behave. They have to be taught, clearly and consistently, what is expected of them and why it matters. And when that clarity is missing, chaos follows. Children thrive within structure. It gives them a sense of predictability in a world that often feels overwhelming and uncertain. When you tell your child what you expect and what will happen if they don't follow through, you're offering them something solid to hold on to. But too many parents give vague instructions or constantly change the rules depending on the day, the mood, or the situation. This unpredictability teaches children that rules are flexible and eventually meaningless. The problem becomes worse when consequences are inconsistent. If your child breaks a rule one day and gets punished, but the next day breaks the same rule and nothing happens, what lesson have they learned? Not the importance of discipline, not the value of obedience or respect. They've learned that outcomes are arbitrary, that authority is unreliable, and once that perception sets in, your credibility begins to erode. A parent without credibility cannot lead, and a child without leadership will begin to push boundaries in search of it. Discipline must be predictable. It has to follow naturally from the choices a child makes. If your child understands that certain actions will lead to specific consequences, and if you always follow through, they begin to internalize that life itself works this way. Cause and effect, action and outcome, that's not just good parenting, that's preparing them for reality, because outside your home, the world will not bend the rules to accommodate them. You're doing them a disservice if you do. It's not enough to hand down punishments. You must take the time to explain the logic behind your rules. Children aren't stupid. They ask why, for a reason. They're not always being defiant. They're trying to understand. If you can't explain your expectations in a way that makes sense, maybe the rule itself needs to be rethought. But if the rule does make sense, explain it. Show them the bigger picture. Connect the small rule to a larger value, responsibility, honesty, effort, respect. There's also a psychological cost to inconsistency that often goes unnoticed. When children don't know what will happen next, whether they'll be praised or punished, ignored or overindulged, they grow anxious. Their nervous systems go into overdrive. They become reactive, defensive, and emotionally unstable. Much of that instability is simply a response to a home environment where rules are unclear and consequences feel like a coin toss. Predictability, on the other hand, creates calm. It builds trust. The bottom line is this: you cannot expect respect if you do not communicate expectations. You cannot enforce order if your rules are a moving target. Your child needs to know where the lines are drawn and what will happen if those lines are crossed. And when they do cross them, they need to see that your response isn't rooted in emotion, but in principle. That steadiness, clear, firm, and fair, is what earns their respect over time, and it teaches them to respect themselves as well. Children pay far more attention to what you do than to what you say. You can repeat instructions, give lectures, or demand better behavior, but if your actions contradict your words, your credibility collapses. The harsh truth is this: you cannot require from your children what you refuse to live out yourself. If you expect respect, you must behave in a way that commands it, not by demanding obedience, but by demonstrating integrity, discipline, and consistency in your own life. A parent who tells their child to control their emotions while regularly losing their temper is sending a mixed message. A father who demands responsibility while procrastinating or blaming others is not teaching leadership. He is modeling avoidance. Children notice these gaps. They may not call them out directly, but they absorb them. They learn, often unconsciously, that rules are for others, not for the rule makers. And eventually they stop listening because they no longer believe what you say. Respect begins with self-respect. That means managing your time, honoring your commitments, and speaking with purpose. It means treating others, your spouse, your neighbors, strangers, with the same decency and restraint you want your children to practice. Children look to their parents as a mirror for how to be in the world. If they see integrity, they begin to internalize it. If they see hypocrisy, they begin to imitate it or reject you outright. You must become the standard you set. If you value honesty, you must tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient. If you value effort, they should see you working hard at something that matters. If you value kindness, then cruelty, sarcasm, or passive aggression cannot be your default tone. Children are wired to test, to observe, to challenge, but they also crave examples. A parent who lives by example has a moral authority that no punishment can match. This doesn't mean you need to be perfect. No one is, but it does mean owning your mistakes when you fall short, and you will acknowledge it. Apologize when appropriate. Let your children see what humility looks like. That simple act does more than salvage your credibility. It teaches your child that being strong doesn't. There's a reason children often idolize people outside the home. Athletes, celebrities, fictional heroes. It's because they are seen as people of action, people who embody strength and vision. But that role is meant for you. When you live with purpose, when you align your actions with your words, you become the kind of figure your child naturally looks up to, not out of fear, but out of admiration. You become someone worth listening to. In the end, it's very simple. If you want your children to act with respect, self-control, and character, then you must first offer them a living example of those qualities. You cannot lead from a place of contradiction. The more disciplined, honest, and consistent you become, the more authority you will carry, quietly, steadily, without having to raise your voice, and the more your child will learn by watching you how to become that kind of person themselves. Discipline is not punishment. It is not an emotional outburst. It is not the expression of your frustration dressed up as authority. Discipline, when done correctly, is a form of teaching. It is meant to guide your child toward better behavior, not crush them for getting it wrong. The moment discipline becomes about your anger instead of their growth, you've lost the moral high ground, and your child, consciously or not, will stop listening, not because they don't care, but because they no longer feel safe. There's a difference between firmness and fury. Firmness draws clear lines and follows through with calm consistency. Fury, on the other hand, is unpredictable. It makes the child nervous, even fearful, and it turns the parent into a source of volatility. Children don't respond well to fear long term. They may comply temporarily to avoid your wrath, but they will not internalize respect. What they learn instead is to hide, to lie, or to rebel the moment your back is turned. When you discipline from a place of rage, you make the situation about you, your loss of control, your stress, your disappointment. But discipline is never supposed to be about the parent's feelings. It should be about the child's behavior, the consequences of their choices, and the principle being reinforced. A child who is yelled at learns that emotion rules the home. A child who is corrected with calm authority learns that rules matter, and that breaking them brings measured consequences. You must never let your own instability become the lesson. If your child walks away from a disciplinary moment more focused on how loud you got or how irrational you seemed, then you've failed to teach anything meaningful. The real lesson gets lost in the noise. A parent's job is to remain composed, especially in conflict, not emotionally detached but steady. That stability becomes a shelter. It tells the child, even when you misstep, I remain the same. This also means understanding the difference between consequences and revenge. Punishment that's driven by the need to make your child feel bad is not discipline, it's retaliation, and it teaches them nothing except how to retaliate themselves. Effective discipline is proportionate, it's explained, it connects the dots between action and outcome, and it should leave your child with the sense that they can do better, not that they are somehow fundamentally broken. Discipline should also come with restoration. After the consequence has been given, talk to your child, ask what they learned, explain what you expect moving forward, reaffirm your relationship. Children who are disciplined in love and clarity grow in both confidence and maturity. They come to see rules not as cages, but as tools, structures that shape them into someone capable, trustworthy, and strong. The goal is not to control your child. It is to help them develop the ability to control themselves. That only happens when discipline is intentional, principled, and grounded in respect for them and for yourself. When you replace explosive reactions with steady correction, you teach more than compliance. You teach wisdom, you teach strength, and in the long run, that kind of discipline builds the very foundation of lasting respect. Many parents make the mistake of aiming only for obedience. They want quiet, compliant children who follow instructions without protest. On the surface, this might look like success. The house is calm, rules are followed, and there's little conflict, but beneath that calm can lie something fragile: obedience without understanding, respect without meaning. If your child only does what you say out of fear or habit, then you've created a follower, not a thinker. And the moment they're outside your influence, they won't know why any of it mattered. Rules must be tied to something larger. A child must understand not just what is expected of them, but why it's worth doing, why it matters to be honest, to try hard, to show respect. That's where real character is built. You aren't raising a robot. You're raising a future adult, someone who will need to navigate complex choices, social pressures, and moral dilemmas. If you only ever teach them to obey, you leave them unprepared for the moment when there's no authority around to guide them. Children need a sense of purpose. They need to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. A family isn't just a group of individuals living in the same house. It should be a team, a shared mission, a place where values are lived out and talked about. If your rules feel arbitrary, just commands handed down from above, your child will eventually reject them. But if your rules reflect a clear vision of who your family is and what you stand for, they become something your child can participate in. You can't expect your child to respect your authority if they don't respect your direction. That's why it's important to communicate not just your rules, but your reasons. Talk to them about the kind of people you hope they'll become. Show them how the boundaries you enforce are connected to that vision. For example, you don't insist on chores just to keep the house clean. You do it to build responsibility, contribution, and pride in one's environment. When children understand the why, they are far more likely to accept the what. This process takes time. It takes conversation, repetition, and openness. You have to be willing to explain and just as willing to listen. You have to create space for your children to ask questions, to challenge ideas, to wrestle with meaning. That doesn't mean giving up your authority. It means deepening it. Because when you can offer more than control, when you can offer clarity and conviction, you become not just someone who enforces rules, but someone who inspires growth. The goal is not perfect behavior. The goal is understanding. A child who understands the purpose behind discipline is more likely to internalize it, to live by those principles even when you're not watching. That kind of respect lasts longer than fear. It produces self-governance, which is the true aim of all parenting, to raise someone who can think, choose, and act well on their own. When your child sees that your leadership is rooted in purpose, not power, not pride, but meaning, they begin to follow you not just because they have to, but because they want to. And in that space, respect is no longer something you demand. It becomes something they offer freely, not out of fear, but out of admiration, gratitude, and trust.